In light of the recent imprisonment of a teacher in Ireland over accusations of misgendering and recent Twitter edition of misgendering is hate speech, it appears a moral and legal battleground has been established and shots are being fired on a daily basis. A lot of it circling around the drain of pronouns. Who knew a noun simplifier would be at the crux of a potential reinvention of human Congress? Today on Totally Classic, we're going to ask the question, pronoun or anti? I'm Brendan McNamara.
And I am Andy Swindler.
And this is Totally Classic, where we attempt every week to bypass fear impulses and even push past our own cognitive dissonance in seeking to talk about as many of the things as people say we're not supposed to talk about as possible, as well as just explore anything together. We get to explore together from two different vantage points, anything in the world that fills us with curiosity.
And
so that's what we're doing today.
Suggest that maybe an alternate to bypass would be that we embrace and confront our fears and move through them together.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, that's my instinct generally. It's like, there's the fear. I better figure that out. And I think that's whatever psychologically what we've discovered as a species, right? Is that whatever exposure therapy is part and parcel to the sort of accepted clinical path of progress to getting over any trauma and fear. So we're going to do that. So just know, anytime you're tuning into this show, if you believe in trigger warnings, I don't necessarily, but any of this show is for that, is for literally like, oh, if there's a trigger, great. Trigger warning is how we kind of figure out things we're going to talk about a lot of times. You're like, oh, wait, that makes me feel unsettled. So this week, it's kind of about speech. And I'm so excited for this, Andy. And I'm hopefully maybe I can even launch this with a question, where it's just like, I'm fascinated in this because this is something I feel like I'm starting to feel like I need to talk about. Like, it's not just something I want to, but something I need to talk about, where I've only confronted this in the real world, I'd say like twice, maybe 3 times, where I was caught in a position of like identifying a person in a particular way by the best assessment I could, and them saying they identify themselves a different way. And I was caught in a like, I don't know what to do here. Like, I do not know how to proceed. Like robot trigger. I'm triggered. I had like almost like a fight or flight mechanism where I'm like, and so I froze generally because I was like, I don't understand. I don't know. I don't see that. I don't know if this is a threat. It's just it's an unknown. So it was a literal. I've only experienced this twice as an unknown circumstance in the world, and I don't. But in neither case did I have any conclusion out of it. I had no general instinctual conclusion, and I still don't. And then since that's started occurring, maybe, I don't know, 3 or maybe 4 years ago, maybe it's the first time I encountered it as a confusion. It's become like a ding dang battlefield. And so, yeah, I had a different outline for this, but my first thought was like, how did you deal? Do you remember the first time you ever identified someone in a way that was then they said, oh, you've incorrectly identified me? And then you were like, oh. And then do you remember like what happened to you instinctually?
I don't know how much I've done it directly to somebody. And I imagine that would stick for me. I tend to be sensitive and not want to, hurt people. Maybe there's one might be, interestingly enough, somebody in one of my men's groups, I think, uses they pronouns, and pretty sure I may have referred to them as a he directly, and they were pretty graceful about it. I think what's more common for me and my colleagues, particularly as I'm in the diversity diversity, equity, and inclusion space, and social justice spaces, and mutual aid. And this is very front and center, purposefully, intentionally. In fact,
Yeah.
it is to center, non-dominant identities, marginalized identities in a lot of ways. And it's what's more common I'm feeling is when I'm on a team and we're talking about somebody. I'm in sales, so we talk about clients a lot.
Sure.
And we're meeting a lot of folks who are in those non-dominant identities. It's quite common, particularly with they. I find they to be a very challenging, just purely at a linguistic, programming, grammar, like level. And I know we'll go deeper, but to me, there's to me, there's honoring the identity. I know that's what we're going to get into because I think we have different views about that.
Yeah.
And then there's just the pure, just neuro-linguistic challenge of reprogramming our association with us with a number of traits, gender, biological sex traits, because we are categorization machines. We're desperately trying to make sense of a world where we are now exposed to, I don't even know, 100-fold more information than our ancestors or more. And so I think we're desperately seeking shortcuts and categorizations. And so that's
for sure.
And that's even grammatically what a pronoun is. You pointed that out. Literally what it is supposed to just
make it easier. So you don't have to keep saying, the shipmaster, he, just say he.
So there's what I'm noticing is when I'm talking with my colleagues, and then we might misgender somebody that we're talking about, particularly with they. I feel like that is, and I could go a little deeper there if you want to go there, but like why I feel like it's harder. What I'm trying to say is it's like if somebody is using a they pronoun, especially if they have what we might associate with more traditional sort of features or characteristics of one of the binary genders, that's to me in many ways is harder than if somebody was transgender and went all in on kind of the other binary.
Gotcha.
And then adopts a lot of features and characteristics maybe we might typically associate with that. I think it's just an easier shortcut. It's like the categorization machine, the pattern recognition in our biology is just like, got it. Okay. Like there might be a couple of little flags of like, that seems a little different, but okay, got it. I'm gonna roll with that. But they is just I'm curious. I don't know. I wonder if you've looked it up. Like I don't know when we started really using they. Some of these things when you do research, it's like, obviously that's a phenomenon that's become much more common in the last, I don't know, 5 years, maybe 10, in terms of at a media level, as a social level.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to dig in a little bit into like the different theories about why I just want to say generically why we're talking about it more, put it that way.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
But then, sometimes you look into the research and it's like, actually the first real instance of that was, 80 years ago or something. So I have really no idea whatsoever. I believe transgender as an identity, as a way of being has been around probably forever in some way. But that's my bias. I'll stop there.
Yeah. In the broadest application of that term, I think for certain. And that's maybe something we'll get into with the categorization elements. You did bring up a word that I think is the crux of this, and the reason I mentioned just a couple things in the intro, which to me I was like, these are good flags. I don't think we need to explore the incidents all that much. I briefly mentioned a teacher being arrested, they were being jailed in Ireland. Let me be technically accurate because I don't like it when people clickbait about things like this. Technically, he was jailed for violating his suspension. So he was suspended from school for quote misgendering a student, and then because he didn't agree to that, he went back to school. He was like, "This is not legitimate," which I understand.
There was a court order. Yeah, that was he was in contempt of court essentially. Yeah.
So he essentially violated the terms of his suspension. And that's why he was actually put in jail. So it wasn't a direct one-to-one. I just want to make that clear so anyone doesn't run away and be like, what? However, it does highlight, obviously, a significant, like that is still a pretty significant issue. That
Yeah,
it got to that place essentially on him misgendering a person. And to me, that connected to Twitter having added misgendering and dead naming as bannable hate, a bannable. Therefore, so you can be literally like put in Twitter jail, which, as I contend, the most significantly influential to our culture at large and the closest to, in terms of the power and privilege wheel, Twitter is the closest to power social media platform, I'd say, in the world, certainly in the United States of America. So being put in Twitter jail is, as far as like in the social sphere, is pretty impactful. And also calling it hate speech, which I was like, those were just like red flags. Is like, hold on a second, we need to talk as a culture way more about this stuff before we get, like, I feel like we've skipped a whole bunch of steps. And I think, again, the whole point of the show is to like talk about these things instead of just like run off to our separate corners. But these things seem like manifestations to me of people running off to their separate corners and just being like, we're going to do it this way. And they're like, well, we're going to keep doing it this way. I was like, wait, come back.
Well, a couple of quick things. One is, yeah, and even in that case, it does feel like this technicality to say, well, he was violating a court order. And I'm glad you brought that up. That's true.
Yes. Yeah.
And we might say, would he be sitting in jail had he not done this?
Right. Yeah.
And not insisted to keep doing it?
Yeah.
Well, probably not. So like there's a correlation there. And then, gosh, I was going to say something about what you just said and it lost me. So let's continue.
Okay. So I thought this was hopefully, without necessarily having to parse out like the deep.
Sorry.
Oh, go.
It was, I don't think, like, I'm not totally landing all my thoughts. So one, it was earlier I was talking about they and how that's challenging just at a neurolinguistic level.
Yeah.
But what I also noticed, and I think this is important, is the reaction is typically very discompassionate with ourselves. Like, and I have some of this, but I'm trying to like soften this a bit, because I don't know that the answer really, or even the best way to reprogram ourselves neurolinguistically, if that's our goal, is to berate ourselves. I mean, that's what I notice. It's the hand slap, the self hand slap. And I see that a lot. Like, because and it is important to catch in the moment, but hopefully with a bit more like, oops. And then if it did harm somebody, which I know we'll get into, because we both care about harm reduction. We see it in different ways a lot of times. So to me, yes, it's coming largely from empathy. Typically, it's like, oh, if I've not addressed this person the way they want to be addressed. Yeah. But hopefully it could be more compassion for ourselves and then with each other, and then even repair, rather than the beratement, which is often shows up like, oh, damn it. Oh, I did it again. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Which, listen, it's again, part of how our brains work. That's like one of the ways in which we try to harshly correct, so we properly categorize things in the same way you talked about, because it's important for us as human beings in order to properly categorize things, in order to evaluate things as threat or benefit, just generally, just in walking around, walking through your kitchen with no like massive anything around. And that's, to me, what these external indicators suggest, is that we've started to almost pathologize or fetishize the shaming or punishment-based tactic, to the point where now it's manifested in the outside world, where it's not even something just like, oh, well, that's how I'm gonna reckon with myself. Because public shame is important, and I've already talked about this. I'm not anti-shame, and I do believe there are social contracts that are appropriate and inappropriate. We should always, again, as long as we keep speech free, we can actually continually negotiate these things. That's, of course, another aspect of this that makes it difficult. But yeah, it's taking the hand slapping where now other people are slapping our hands, or instead of just like someone in direct relationship with the dog who pooped on the floor, putting the dog's face near the poop or whatever. I don't have a dog, so I don't even know if this is appropriate or inappropriate dog rearing. I've just seen people do it, whatever. It's like, oh, you got to do it quick or else the dog forgets. I don't know if any of that's true. I'm not a dog whisperer. I'm just using it as a pop culture reference, folks. I'm not advocating anything in regards to this. People are very sensitive about dogs. So that's, again, just as we caveat on many things on this show, just want to caveat that as well. But it feels like socially now, there's not only that hand slapping instinct, but a collective, like how dare you? Again, this whole like you're transphobic or blah blah blah, or like or this whole thing of like you're trying to you're trying to say this person doesn't exist. And then it's kind of like taking the face, you're trying to like shove your face in the shame, in the poop. You just verbally pooped, and now I'm going to stick your face in it. We're all going to do it. Everyone around is going to do it, And of course, this happens on like online very rapidly, where 15 comments will kind of like shove the poop in your face or shove your face in the poop or whatever. And that's where I'm like, it takes the instinct you're talking about. Like, it's already out in the world now. I would say in general, that's actually how people are more consistently dealing with it. Generally, which I think you speaks not only to maybe a social tendency, but an internal tendency that has all sorts of foibles. So I know I'm talking for too long, so let me hand it back over to you with another question. I'm trying to ask more questions this week, so ask me as many questions as you want. But a lot of this seems to center or circle the drain, not only of pronoun use, but I thought an interesting way to get into it before we even get into the courtesy element or the courtesy or what is the most courteous thing to do. Misgendering to me is a fascinating word. And I thought the Twitter one most especially was potent. And this is a question I asked on Twitter, but no one answered me. Using the word misgendering as a doorway into this conversation, how would Twitter determine whose claim of gender is accurate?
Well, I mean, right now I have my pronouns on my Zoom account that you can see. So that's what I think is probably fundamental to this is I think you and I disagree on can a person decide what gender they are? Or I say yes, and I think you say no. Is that right?
I think I've never heard anything theoretically convincing or rationally convincing to separate gender from biological sex. Meaning, and certainly in my own speaking of personal experiences and usages, I'm 44 years old, and I have never used the word like boy or man to refer to anything but like someone's biological. Like it's a gendered word, just like a pronoun, right? It's a simplified word for a specific category. You just say man instead of a biologically sex man. So and again, that's I had to look this up. One of those things we talked about. I was like, wait, is this common uses or is this just how I've manifested? But that's common use for all of human history until like somewhere in the past generation. Like the biological sex and gender were inextricably linked. And it seems in the 50s and 60s is when people started to go, well, actually, let's look at this more piecemeal potentially. So then I would say people can't, it is not necessarily a mutable thing. It can be an improperly estimated thing. Meaning I think one can misgender an intersex child, for example. You could get that wrong, but I don't think a person can change their sex / gender any more than someone could change their race.
And even the way I said it, I want to adjust because I said
sure.
Well, I asked. I mean, the question is fair game in terms of do we believe people can decide their gender?
Yeah.
But in the context of, and I'm fortunate to know a few transgender friends.
Yeah.
And now work alongside somebody who's transgender every day. And so most of this I'm going to pull from personal experience, which in some ways is deeper and more intimate, in other ways is not like some huge research project. It's more anecdotal in that way. So I'll just
yeah.
And in even the way I said that, right, like, but somebody decides to implies that they're one day just being like, oh, it's just flippant. Like, one day, hey, I was born a boy and one day I want to be a girl. And in my experience talking to folks, it's much more like, no, they've always deeply felt that they were, let's just for now, to keep it a little simpler, leave it to the binaries rather than the non-binary. That's a whole other discussion I think we're gonna have. But let's say somebody is transgender, which means they were biologically assigned boy, male genitalia. And yet, in my experience, knowing folks, like deep down, it's like felt like a lie to them to present as a boy, and with clothing we would typically associate with a boy, hairstyles, I mean, all of these visual cues, right? We probably all have some sense of what those are. That it's a lie, that it's like every day is a kind of trauma. And Gabor Mate talks about this a lot. It's like, basically, you know, we all want to express ourselves authentically, and yet we all compromise that to belong in some, typically. That's all is, trying to avoid that word, but I actually feel like this one is so broad as to probably be true. We probably all made some decision at some point, no matter how minute, that was like, oh yeah, I want to belong here, so I'm gonna just I like grape Kool-Aid. Or who doesn't? And I'm like,
I hate grapes. Purple's my least favorite.
But in this way, it's like this deep, and I'm a straight white man. Okay, I need to characterize that. Like I'm speaking about people in a lived experience I do not share or have. So you know, I want to. This whole show is just full of. This is like the caveat episode. And I can pass on what I think I've learned just in the context of us trying to grow and learn and explore together. Which is that it's like so deeply felt that it's like every day is like waking up and living a lie, and that carries its own kind of trauma. And then when they, you know, if they do, you know, come out and as transgender and adopt a different identity, it's actually their true identity. That's how I perceive my friends who express in this way.
So it's interesting. Well, oh gosh, it's like 3 different threads that I'm curious about. Well, one is from that. So then my point of view, viewing that would be like, well, then the impetus appears to be a desire to transfer that trauma onto others. If it's compelled speech, then you're forcing others to lie and compromise their estimation of who you are. And then if they don't, they actually are expelled or are harmed for that. Whereas if someone seeks to, I don't know, the other part of it seems internal. And so you're like in this case, we've already moved past internal into external. So the system of punishment is then if you don't agree with me that I'm telling the truth and the external appraisal of me was the lie, then you hate me. It's hate speech, right? Now, again, I'm not saying people are saying this, but this is kind of where it's already been taken into the legal realm. It's hate speech, and it's you can't be around me or anyone, society, until you agree with me on my internal appraisal of not only internal appraisal of that, but then internal appraisal of what gender is as a separate from sex thing, which again, we have not agreed on as a society. We've kind of leapt into the punishment if you disagree with it, but we've barely talked about it as a species. As opposed to, even just initially, let's say you felt like you were living a lie. Well, the lie may just have been of how you manifest your biological sex, in which case you, individual who thinks you're transgender, may well have an inappropriate assessment of what gender is. Like you actually, so then you're like, I feel like I'm a man, but I feel like I'm a woman in all of these ways that I can literally categorize for you. And I was like, okay, but you're a man. So then you're just wrong that those are womanly. Like you're just incorrect. You've incorrectly assessed, in which case you're not, it doesn't make you a woman. It just actually makes all those things masculine, all those aspects, all those things of like, I feel like I'm a woman in this way and this way. So like just initially, that's where my mind would go. Because ultimately, if it's a lie either way, then either way it's a lie. Like if you're compelling someone to say something that they don't believe is true, but they're doing it out of courtesy to you, let's say, or because they like don't want to keep harming you in the damage you've done, then you're taking on damage in altering your assessment of substantive reality, right? Which also, again, this only slightly tethers, but I won't. But I'm just to link this into my thought. The idea of assigning gender is very atypical. We don't like typically, right? A doctor doesn't assign a gender. You walk into a class and you get assigned a seat, and you just like, John, you have to sit seat 4A, row 4 in the first seat. Typically it's actually an evaluation process. So you've been appraised to be, that is like, you would literally, I think for most doctors, right? It would be based on if there's been any scans, you can look internally, but it really is just like literally just looking at your junk and be like, okay, that's a pseudo vagina with a really big clitoris. So you're in, I don't know, but, or that's a micro penis with a slight fissure. I don't know. You know, there's some confusion elements, but that's such a minute percentage of human beings as to like, it's probably not part of the conversation. And intersex has nothing to do with transgender anyway. So, but it just gets brought up sometimes. So I just like, yes, of course, I acknowledge that exists, but it has nothing to do with transgender conversation in rational speech. But it's actually an appraisal. It's going, oh, here's what I looked at, and therefore that's what gender you are. And then and both and even just on birth forms, this is how we've evaluated medical. It's like sex or gender. I've seen forms with both terms on there. They're synonymous in terms of medical usage or social usage. So then, yeah, I don't know. So it's fraught with peril to me. But you're an empath, so I know your instinct is, oh, I don't want to cause any harm here. If someone has a response and says I'm this, then you're just gonna be like, okay, well, I'm gonna roll with that. Whereas I go, oh wait, are you? Is that true? Like I'm not as naturally empathic. Where I'm like, wait, what is that? What, is that true? Because it reaches an immediate cognitive dissonance for both of us, because then we both think opposite truths.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
That's yeah. There's a lot there. To me, it's a false equivalency to even put those categories of harm in the same category, of the same box. The same, what am I trying to say? I think what I heard you say is that, you know, for somebody to be, I don't know, I'll keep using this term misgendered, which, do we define it, by the way? I don't know. So I think
I don't think anyone's defined it. It basically would be saying you're saying it would be misidentifying someone's gender.
Yes.
Inaccurately assessing someone's gender.
And I think that's where your cognitive dissonance mainly is, where it's like, well, wait a minute, like I can see you and I can absorb all these visual cues.
Yeah. And in person, I can smell you, and like it goes beyond everything related to costume, what you're wearing, makeup, physical features, anything. Through our whole lives, we've seen people who are like, oh, you might for a second go, wait, I don't know, that's Pat, right? On SNL. It's like, I don't know if that's a man or a woman. And then something in you, you just tend to know. It's rare to impossible that you ever find someone doesn't care what they're presenting. Doesn't matter what cues they're presenting. We know as human beings, and not with 100% accuracy. I didn't look at it. I'm not checking anyone's pants, right? But you know pheromonally, and you get the cues regardless of what cues they're giving you. You know what I mean?
Right.
That makes sense.
This is like a pretty dated reference, but I keep thinking of that scene in Crocodile Dundee where there's I think an older woman with a low voice, and he literally grabs her crotch.
Yeah.
To see sort of what's up there. So, you know, short of that level of like social violation, which in that movie was celebrated. She was like, oh, that was great. He was hot. And I'm like,
yeah. I don't celebrate that.
But, you know, short of that, yeah, I appreciate you kind of spelling that out, because you know, one of my curiosities for you is like, well, how do you know? Like if we go your path and it's like gender and biological sex are intertwined, and basically that's the reality as far as this goes. You're either male or you're female, or in a very, as you said, minute amount of cases, something biologically in between. Then how do you know? So thanks for spelling that out, because I've been curious about that from you. And I, you know, to some extent, yes, intuition, pheromones. I mean, I believe those things. In fact, I appreciate that, because you're usually super hyper rational, and I think those are more like embodied, almost mystical qualities about being animals that are important. And so I think that misgendering is an interesting term, in the sense that it's typically used, in the way I would hold it is, you know, I have a friend who was born as a biologically assigned male, and then at some point, you know, came out as transgender, and now they're a trans woman.
Yeah.
And that and then they're going to want to use pronouns, she and her.
Yeah.
And so misgendering, then it would be, if I, let's just put it at a few levels of a spectrum. So
Yeah.
actually the first level would just be accidentally, like, gosh, I've known this person as a boy or a man for 30 years. And that's hard. I mean, I've talked to a few parents of transgender children,
Sure.
and that's just fucking hard, like
Yeah.
especially for a parent, I would think, because my God, you've seen every aspect of their biology since they were
Yeah.
born.
Well, yeah.
And I
And
know,
even before, yeah, when they were in the womb.
right. So
Yeah.
that's probably the most challenging space. So let's say there's like this accidental category, or just very hard to reprogram, the neurolinguistics.
Yeah.
And then I think we kind of step up a spectrum into an intentional category, which is what the Irish court case was about, where, say, instead of just accidentally forgetting to call you she, I'm going to actively resist that, because
Yes.
so both of those are in the woke camp. I would say both of those classify as misgendering. Hopefully on the accidental scale, we can have a bit more compassion about that.
Oh,
And on the
interesting.
intentional side, it's like, that's where this controversy is really happening. That's why people are going to jail and things, because they're not respecting the gender identity of another person.
Right.
And that person, I think, is stepping into, in many cases, maybe all cases, their true identity.
Yeah.
And I know you pulled up some research about just kind of the theories of, well, that's interesting, because we are hearing more about this now. So
Yeah.
why
We
is
certainly
that?
are. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's a whole branch I won't go into right now.
Yeah.
So that's one whole piece of it. But then I think what you're saying, so to me, the greatest harm would be in that category, where I'm either accidentally or intentionally, like, calling somebody who has at some point changed genders or into maybe their more natural gender. I am, whether accidentally or intentionally, I'm referring to them as their previous gender. So that's how I hold the definition of misgendering. And I think what I hear you saying is, well, yeah, but if I look at somebody and I just know in every way that they're a biological woman, female, and they are representing as a man, like, they are the ones actually misgendering themselves.
Yes.
And it causes me then harm to or at least cognitive dissonance, if not harm, to be forced to go against my own truth and awareness of what they are. Am I getting your characterization?
Yeah, it's close to that. Yeah. And so some of it does root down to whether gender and biological sex are separable. And again, they're historically, the answer has straight up been no. So this is why the conservative argument tends to be, this is not a real thing. This is why the comparison is often made to anorexia, that someone feels fat their whole life. And then eventually they're like, you have to call me Fat Alice from now on. And then if you don't call me fat, or if you refer to me as skinny, then you're harming me, because I know it doesn't matter what you look and see. It doesn't matter if you look and see ribs. I look in the mirror and I know what I see, and I know what I've always seen. That would be harm on a grand scale. It's not just harm in terms of me, like, oh, I don't like saying something I don't want to say. That's one level, which isn't harm, that also the person who feels that they are different or perceives that they are different than they are perceived as, similar to their harm. But also it's a harm in terms of my social contract with another human being, which is to always be honest with another human being, it would be discourteous of me, it would be rude of me, it would be unkind of me, it would be hateful of me. So then I have to hate someone because they want me to hate them and tell them a lie. So unless I can be appraised of the thing, then it would be harmful for me as a social entity in the collective. It would be harm for me as an individual conscientiously. It would be harm to me, to my senses, to actually start invalidating my own senses as a system of appraisal of other things, which doesn't make any sense, because the way the person who's presenting an opposite vantage point has done the same thing. So they're saying my senses are valid, your senses aren't valid. So then I'm invalidating my own senses which they feel like they've had imposed upon them.
Hmm.
But when you're encountering strangers, you've never imposed anything on them in their entire life. You've never done any harm to them. You know what I mean? Now, I don't know what this Irish teacher or whatever, maybe he was a tyrannical teacher. So maybe there's a whole system of payback going on here. I don't know. But even beyond the accident, there's I say all this only to say I think you've summed what I've said very accurately, except in that the idea of saying something different than what a person tells you is in any way harmful or is in any way incorrect, especially when you use a word like misgender. Then we have to establish accuracy. And that's why I think Twitter is fascinating, because like Twitter is a flipping virtual service. There'd never be a picture or anything, little avatars, and you can write your pronouns in the bio, but people make up fake things all the time. There are people who make up fake celebrity things that says it's Obama. So, well, if I don't call that person Obama, it's obviously not Obama. Obama has a blue check. This is not real Obama. I'm not going to call him Obama or Mr. President or whatever. So on Twitter, you're just like, what in the world? There's no way to that unless you literally get doctors on the premises and social scientists to argue this out. Like this is a huge question. So we've leaped, we've leaped way past it in speaking about it, but it does go down to the micro level, which is why when I've just literally the first time ever, I was at Salt and Straw, one of my favorite ice cream places in the whole world. And
very good.
It's so good. And I was checking out and this man, like 6'4" dude, very, very attractive guy in downtown LA, Salt and Straw. And I was like, I've been practicing, especially for the past 5 or 6 years before that. When I lived in the South, I didn't like using sir and ma'am. I felt like it was imposed upon me. And I was like, I'm not using it. Since I left the South, I started to go, oh, now I kind of get it. When people don't impose it on me, I like it as a choice. So this also speaks to my nature. And so especially with homeless people, unhoused people, I started using sir and ma'am as often as possible to constantly kind of keep, especially in Los Angeles, where there's a massive population of unhoused people, that I would call them sir and ma'am when I engaged them. So I'd make sure that my tone was not dismissive, but of respect. So then I started using that in my vernacular. But that's where it began. So I don't always use it, but I just happen to use it that day, especially in service situations, which I always feel slightly uncomfortable about because there's a weird power hierarchy there that I don't like. So I said to the man who had served me or whatever and got my scoops, and I was like, all right, thank you so much, sir. And he was like, I'm not a sir. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I looked at him and I was like, well, what? And I was like, I didn't want to get in an argument with him. I'm just buying ice cream here, right? And so I was like, oh, all right. All right. I mean, I did my thing and put the tip in, and I was like, all right. He's like, have a good day. Have a good day. And I was like, yep, have a good day, ma'am. And I called him man, but I was like, oh, I didn't do it rebelliously, and it could have sounded like ma'am. So I was like, I don't know, but I wasn't not looking for a fight or whatever, but I'm stuck in exactly the same experience I'm in now, which is like, but no, like, you're not, like, I can't be convinced that, like, there's not enough information for me to be convinced of this. So then I can't just do it. I can't just like do a thing and call you a thing. Also, I don't know you personally. Again, this is as with anorexia. If someone's like, I was like, oh, what's up? Looking trim. I'm not trim. I'm fat. I'd be like, what? But you're not. So I don't know. I can't. You know what I mean? It is cognitive dissonance, but it's like a hiccup, because it's actually, we have to understand that using someone's pronoun, quote unquote preferred pronouns, is actually a complex, evaluative, ethical, and rational effort. Like, it's really comprehensive. And I say this as someone who has a natural resistance to being told what to do. Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense. If that helps kind of like explain it out, as opposed to just like it's immediately harm. I was like, to me, it seems immediately harmful to comply with anything. And again, we've talked about this in general. That's my general credo, but
yeah, and there's I think that makes sense in a lot of categories, where particularly how we started this whole show talking about some of the things around the pandemic.
Yeah.
I wonder, a curiosity, I think part of what we try to do here is kind of look at our own biases and our own nature. And, I wonder if my nature as a relativist is helpful, is one of the reasons why I adopt this ideology.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, that would
in
be,
addition to, being an empath and sort of being, in some ways, maybe even overly sensitive about hurting people.
yeah,
And we talked about last episode was about free speech, this idea of editing ourselves. So there's some question I hold about, like, well, when does that end? Like, how many constructs do we have to, like, sort of reinvent and hold?
yeah,
Generally,
yeah,
whereas what I think is truly at the core of this, to me, is just,
yeah,
it's as simple as, like, really truly getting to know people. And as we would get to know any friend, we would learn, like, what triggers them, what harms them, and hopefully try to avoid that. I mean, to me, that's part of friendship, or help them grow through that, or whatever, but at least be really deeply aware of that.
yeah,
And I think, in this category, it's like, it might even, I wonder if it's almost simpler to talk about dead naming than misgendering, because to me that one's clearer. And we've talked a little bit about naming and mispronunciation. I think this goes deeper
yeah,
than that. Somebody, I was just at an event 2 days ago and somebody brought this up. And so I think what I understand, at least from friends I've talked to, is that, living that lie of the sort of assigned gender and the presentation of that gender is in and itself harmful and traumatic. And then when somebody comes out, they typically change their name
yeah,
to be, whatever gender they want to, that they're living into. And so then referring to them by their given name and their former gender, their dead name, can be quite traumatic, because that kind of brings them back to that state and the life that they lived before. And again, not having this lived experience, I don't want to go
sure.
too deep.
Oh, sure, sure.
Because, but that's my at least high level understanding of it. And so to me, like, I wonder if, is that clearer to you than the pronoun thing?
It is. I guess my just immediate instinctual, I haven't fully evaluated this, but just thinking on my feet, I would say if you knew anyone before they changed their name, then their old name is fair game. If you met them afterwards, then how you've filed them, it's perfectly appropriate for you to maintain previous filing. And it is, I think it would be actually, I guess, because this transcends into like who's aggressing on who. In which case, if someone has been unaltered and refuses to alter, that's not hateful. That's just like, no, I like this one. And someone's like, no, it's different now. You're like, well, I don't see it that way. So no, I can love you and disagree with your name change, and I don't like it. And no, I know you as this, and this is what I've called you forever, and I'm going to call you that. Don't call me that. If it's like ass, ass hat or whatever, then I can understand that. But if it's not explicitly like something that could be evaluated from any objective standard as offensive, I think however you first met someone, as long as it was accurately presented to you, you accurately appraised it, as opposed to I thought your name was Brandon when we first met. It was Brandon. It was like, oh, it's Brendan. But if someone met me as Brandon and they called me, I know there are people in my life who do that, who met me as, they've called me Brandon for 10 years, whatever. They've never called me by my correct name. I've corrected them. All right. Some ways I'm like, all right, whatever. I'm gonna make a joke about it. And maybe you're doing it to stimulate me, which is totally appropriate. Stimulating and provoking people is not in and of itself harm. Because again, I'm a comedic person. So for me, I'm like, if someone has a sensitivity and a harm in their life, that's pretty much what I'm going to make the most, whatever the worst thing that I know about them, that's the thing eventually I'm going to find a way to joke about and joke about often. Right. That's my natural instinct of how to help people heal. Tear the muscles so it can regrow stronger. That's just my intuition, my natural instinct, where my body sends me or whatever. So I don't know. That would be my fast and loose like proclamation. You can change your name, but that doesn't mean everyone else has to. But I think it would be weird if you introduce yourself as something and you're like, I'm going to go research this. Your name used to be blah blah blah. Like that to me, or it's like that to me is in the realm of the aggressive. So if someone introduced themselves as blah, 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 their name's Doreen and they used to be Derek, then I'm like, well, I don't know that. So I'm going to call you by whatever name you give me, whether it appears, because I know my daughter's name is Moses, which is a traditionally man's name. But if someone was like, yeah, is it really? Did it used to be Marilyn? That, I don't know, to me, that pushes past whatever line of like courtesy and harm. But yeah, again, this is, I think, but again, I'm a liberal. And so to me, the idea of compelling anyone to do anything that they don't think is honest is that they can evaluate. And then, but this is where it gets into it too, right? The lie, the living the lie part, maybe it connects to. It's like, how do you establish what the lie is? Because just because you think something firmly to be true, I think anorexic are a great example, or schizophrenics, right? There's people talking to me. They know it's true. They will attack you eventually if you don't validate their what they perceive to be accurate, but it's not accurate. So then this is the whole thing of like, how do you, were they living a lie? And I don't know. I'm not saying I know the answer. We'd have to go this on a case by case basis, and it would take flipping forever, which is why you said your tactic is fantastic. You have to get to know people. And I think on both sides, you have to get to know people before you demand someone call you a thing. The same way we just got to negotiate these things on an individual level. So the idea of socially being like, nope, you must always, I was like, what are you talking about? We're not even there yet. We don't even know if this is real or not. Is where I am. You know what I mean? We don't know were they living a lie, or do they have an internal, or are they just inaccurately assessing their own circumstance? And I don't know.
So it's fascinating because to me, like what you just said about the name somebody wants to be called.
Yeah.
And I think I heard you say like, well, hey, if somebody introduces you a certain name they want to be called, then you ought to just call them that because that's their name. So I put that in the same category as pronouns. So I think this is probably the crux.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Between us, I'm just kind of like, yes. Okay, that's the pronoun you want. Great. I'm like, to me, that's just the same categorically. It might be challenging for me for a variety of reasons I've kind of already talked through.
Yeah.
If I knew them before, or if they seem to be presenting differently than that identity, or pronouns kind of match up, and like, okay, well, that's kind of my stuff I got to figure out. So that seems like a big difference between us. Whereas I think you're saying,
interesting. Yeah.
Well, no, if I clearly know they, for today's purpose, I'll use the term, we're assigned to biological sex, which I think you equate with gender, then they're lying to me in a way. That's almost what they
very well could be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have to evaluate. I can't assume. It wouldn't make any sense for me to assume that, because this is the whole premise, right? Is I can't assume that somebody else is correct when they tell me what is true, right? That would be the whole transgender trauma element. People kept telling them something that they knew wasn't true. So then it wouldn't make any sense for them to go around telling someone else what they know not to be true. You know what I mean? So that to me is like, that's the sort of hypocritical element, which again, I don't spend much time telling people, hey, you're a hypocrite, but there is a hypocritical element in it as relates to the trauma element. So yeah. So then to me, it's whether gender, biological sex is sound making, which in the sense that you're just like, that's the sound you make to let someone know that you're referring to them, right? That's all our names are, right? Mama, yeah, ba da da ba. It's all you're doing is shaping those more specifically. But I think pronouns are part of the social construct, and this is the harm element. If we turn those he and she, man and woman, into just sounds that we make, then we have this is a progressive idea. We could remake all of society and language in a way as to make it again better. So I understand that progressive instinct. However, we could dismantle entire systems that are keeping people copacetic with existence, and have actually built frameworks. Since we're a dimorphic sexual species, so it's integral to our identifier as classes of types of human beings from which you face certain benefits and certain dangers, especially because we know in our society how much more dangerous, for example, men are. Physically. So that to me is the harm rupture there of like but maybe I'm leaping into your argument and I was just trying to find a steel man your argument from within, as opposed to finding out what you meant. I was just thinking of it in terms of sounds, like if names are the same as pronouns or whatever.
Yeah. A few things about for me.
I hadn't considered that though. So it was cool to hear you say it.
Yeah, I mean, on the language thing, I haven't seen a lot of people talk about the romantic languages or the romance languages in particular, the ones that are where the entire structure,
Yeah.
verbs have a masculine or feminine sort of form.
Yeah.
So I don't know. That seems like even more complex than English.
Yeah. This is why Latin.
Yes, we have gender pronouns and things,
Yeah.
but at least like it's not like every single aspect. And yeah, I think you're about to say Latinx, which would be a whole thing. But one thing that's, I think, being closer to transgender people in my life has made me more empathetic, even about non-trans naming. My brother grew up with a nickname, and then at some point he went back to his given name, a more full name.
Yeah.
And we kept calling him the original nickname, to your point, like, because probably 30 years or something. And
yeah,
it's like, well, that's deep. That's real deep programming. But it was cool because in the last year, I don't know, 6 months, I actually asked him. I was like, hey, you know what?
How's that going?
Well, I don't know. It was like, does it bother you when I call you by your like the nickname you had as a child?
Yeah.
And he just said something kind of like you did. He's just like, well, no, like if it, family and people who called me that before, like, it doesn't bother me. I'm not worried about it. And I'm not trying to extrapolate that into like,
no. Yeah.
Transgender or anything like that. But what I want to point out is that just even being in this dialogue with you and others and knowing more transgender folks in my life, gave me more empathy for where this phenomenon might show up in other ways,
all over the place.
And that's really healthy. Just to again, now I know my brother better in a way. Now I know a little more about what how he feels, and who knows, for all this time he could have been just sort of absorbing those as hits to be polite or not to want to cause us stress or something like that. But the last thing I'll say, and then I don't know, we probably need to wrap up, but maybe we could, I don't know how many questions we've actually hit, but we could do maybe one more.
One.
But one. Yeah, great. So maybe this is a two-parter. It's a big subject. But to me, I think what it boils down to for me is like, I trust people's truth. Like I trust what they tell me their truth is. Which says a lot about our natures. Like, to me, that's more about being an empath. That's more about being, I think, relativistic. Whereas I feel like well, I don't want to characterize it. So how do you react to that? How do you see the world and see this?
Oh, well, yeah, no, I think this is one of the great things about the show, because I don't believe in the concept of my truth at all. Like, I don't think it exists outside of like a cool theory, like a cool way to theorize about one's strongly held subjective perspectives. And if that's all it means, then I'm like, oh, okay, then I sort of believe in that. But I think the word truth is misapplied. Again, it's like misgender. It's a misapplication of a semantic, meaning that truth is that which is validated, like validated reality, right?
It's like truth, literally.
Yeah, truth is that which, exactly. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. And reality is perceived individually, right? We all perceive it in some degree, a mix of what can be qualified as objective and subjective senses, right? This is why science became so obsessively important to human beings, because you're like, oh, wait, is here a way? And you're like, well, it's not as objective as you think, but whatever. Here's a way for us to then evaluate collectively, and collective evaluation is imperative, right? So then I'm not instinctually, even if someone says this is my truth, I'd immediately be like, I'm ready to not believe. Like I wouldn't even be I would have a difficulty maintaining like a neutral position. And in some ways too, because I thought Trump, I'm going to bring up Trump. That's right. I love talking about that guy. Everybody's favorite person to talk about. I don't know why. But whatever. The one thing I thought was good about Trump as president is I thought he was the destroyer of moral relativism and of my truth, because it was something he even used in his legal defense, right? Giuliani was like, well, we all have truth. You know what I mean? Fake news, some person's fake news. Like, he used it. And I was like, oh, he used the phrase. I was so excited. And so I was like, oh, this will kill it, because most of the people I know who use my truth hated Donald Trump. And the reason they hated Donald Trump, because there was someone who, I mean, my goodness gracious, if there's someone who lived his truth on the grandest stage some of us have ever seen in our life, and you're like, look what that did though. Like, in terms of like division, and in terms of people just straight be like, no, this sucks. If you just live your truth and just however you see the world is exactly how you're going to behave, and exactly what you think is true, and shut up anybody who disagrees with me. You're like, no, we hate that, like as a collective. So to me, I was just like, yeah, my truth doesn't really exist. Now my perception of truth can exist in your perception of truth, but truth does exist as a separate entity. But I'm very classic. This is why totally classic. I'm very classically Torahic. I'm very classic Judaic. I'm very classic Greek in that sense, and that the logos, truth exists outside of ourselves, and everything we can do is to sort of scrabble to understand that which exists as a preeminent, pre-existent, absolute standard that we can only partially access or whatever. So to me, I was just like, even with my truth, you have to put like quotes around truth, and it has to be lowercase t. And but again, so that's where it takes me. It takes me into the range of the semantic and the philosophical, to say, yeah, I'd be like, I don't, and I think especially in the last 2 or 3 years, I'm as skeptical as I've always been innately provocative person, I guess, sometimes on purpose, sometimes this is just who I am, and who it both nature and nurture, because both my parents are nonconformists. But I certainly have been more skeptical as to anyone's claims of what is true. The more and more I've been like, oh, wow, everyone's saying this is true. And then I'll go look things up and actually find out about them and discover that tons of people were just straight up lying, either to me or to themselves or whatever. So then I'm like, all right, I'm gonna need some evidence for a lot of claims, especially ones that this isn't even a case of like, that doesn't, I don't know too much about that. But as to something like gender, or the appraisal of someone's gender, it's something I've done, of course, for 40, maybe even pre-birth, I don't know, for like 45 years of my life, and be like, oh, okay, so I've been wrong for 45 years. You're like, okay, it's possible. It could be a massive cognitive dissonance I need to overcome, but I'm going to expect some sort of, there has to be an evidentiary basis in order to call it truth, he says in a long soliloquy.
Well, I think it's evident that for whatever reason, I seem extremely liberal and basically like changing almost everything I've ever known. Yeah, sure, why not? Let's do that. And you're understandably conservative, like in that way. And
yeah,
I think you've called yourself, I think, a linguistic conservative, and
yes,
but in also some of these social constructs. And I appreciate that dialogue between us, because I would say the truth is somewhere in the middle. You would say, no, that's not true.
Well, it might be, or literally one person might be correct, right? I mean, this is the enforcement of hate law. This is hate speech, or you hate me if you disagree with me, which would mean the current narrative as it's progressing is, no, you're just completely wrong. So of course I respond to that with, I don't respond to that in kind. I don't go, no, you're completely wrong. I go, no, let's talk before you decide I'm completely wrong in my appraisal. We better talk about this. You know what I mean? And it has to be convincing. And I'm a rational person, and I am a classic liberal, so I'm open to talking about all these things. I'm not just going like, you're an idiot, you're wrong. But we have to, if the conversation is going to start, you're hateful, you're misgendering, which means you're incorrect, you're incorrectly evaluating this thing, then I think it's I actually think it was I don't know how you how you're still alive, Andy, in my conservative impulses. I was like, how are you still, because then somebody be like, here's arsenic, it's not poison. And you'd be like, okay. I was like, how more dangerous and deadly things not happen to you? And not saying I haven't had drugs handed to me and it just was a pill and someone told me it was a thing and I just took it. I have done that in my life. But as a general principle, I try to live it as a general principle. And even when I do that, I was like, all right, well, this could be ecstasy or I'm dead.
Well, that's probably a good note to leave it on.
Yeah.
All right, my friend, I love you.
I love you.
I was, yeah, this to me was another tricky one, because I remember in some of our earlier exchanges that I felt more like emotionally reactive to some of your opinions about this subject than others. But as is the nature and the intention of this show, I think we've worked through some of that. We don't agree on a lot of things, and I learned from you. I'm grateful for that. Yeah,
it's cool to learn from you as well. Like, that's the thing. That's all as one who would probably gleefully, quote unquote, misgender someone. I was like, I want to understand why you wouldn't do that instinctual. Again, basically, why would someone's intuition, like in your case, this is great. Why would your intuition lead you in the exact opposite way that my embodied intuition would lead me? Right. And then trying to figure out, okay, well, how did you validate, as with anything, right? How do you validate your intuition? How do you blah, blah, blah? So like, to me, this is endlessly fascinating. So I wish we could all just keep talking about this stuff and try to really figure it out. Because I think actually the thing is, if we actually all talked about it, we could actually figure it out instead of just staying in this place of like this weird cagey thing, or you hate me, or I hate you, or you think I don't exist, or you think I don't know. I mean, like all that does is this tit for tat thing. Just mutually assured destruction. I don't want that. I want you to, I want all these people to still be around.
I don't want the mad either. We can agree on.
No,
All right. I love you.
love
Goodbye.
you. Bye.